Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day here on the show. And as always, I like to jump the gun here on the show. I like talking about Sunday Night Football a little bit early. And so, I'm going to be talking about this bizarre matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and Minnesota Vikings here. And it was made bizarre a little bit more on the Colts side of things when it was announced that Anthony Richardson will be benched in favor of Joe Flacco for this one. I don't necessarily know how to feel about this move. It's very interesting, but if the Colts feel like Joe Flacco is the best option for the rest of the season, then so be it. And I've heard that there were rumors there was tension in the Colts locker room that could have led to this decision, so maybe that's why they wanted to allay that and potentially have Joe Flacco come in and try and settle things down. But it's truly an interesting situation there in Indianapolis. One that really makes me not dislike this team, but makes me a little skeptical about what it's going to do going forward. Because if Richardson's future is going to call into question, then is he really the answer there? And does he have a future in the NFL even? If he's already causing a little bit of issue within the Colts organization. Then you have the Vikings on the other side of things, who are coming off their second loss this season after a 5-0 start. And it was a very emotional loss. I feel like this was one coming after a very emotional game against the Lions, where you lose on a last-second field goal, basically. You travel halfway across the country to a Rams team that you weren't expecting to bring back both the weapons, maybe just one, but not both. And you get the Sean McVay treatment, so to speak. And I feel like this game should be an easy Minnesota win, just because what I'm hearing from the Colts is not great. But I feel like this is another game where Minnesota could be tested. And I feel like in the grand scheme of things, if the Vikings don't win this game, then who's to say this Vikings team might find itself falling into an abyss? I feel like that's the big thing that I could take away from this game, that as much as I want to feel like this is a bounce back for the Vikings, there's a seed of doubt that this could be another one of those games where a 39-year-old Joe Flacco, much like he did with the Browns last year, leads the Colts into the promised land yet again. And it's kind of a little bit, not necessarily deja vu, I don't know a good phrase for this, but it's kind of a little bit weird to picture a world where this could be the turning point for both of these teams' seasons. If the Vikings lose, it allays fears that this team would completely go off the tracks. But if the Colts win, I feel like a lot of people will be saying, surely Joe Flacco can't do this again. And the funny thing about this game especially for the Colts, and I might have to look at the Colts' schedule to really assess how a trip to the postseason could be plausible. This is one of those games where Joe Flacco starting gives me a little bit more pause than I would initially think. And that's because this Vikings defense is still one that is primed to play well against quarterbacks like Flacco. And potentially, Anthony Richardson's mobility could have helped in this scenario, but I feel like if the Colts trust in Joe Flacco more right now than Anthony Richardson, that's a huge morale boost. We saw it last week with Jameis Winston with the Browns. Maybe it's not as deep as that, but if there is some sort of tension surrounding Anthony Richardson and his role with the Colts, then Joe Flacco might be someone who can boost the morale. I think he's still less than ideal for this matchup, which is why I'm a little bit apprehensive saying that the Colts could potentially cover this spread, even though it's a big one, and Minnesota minus 6.5, and the over-under is 45.5. I still think it's an interesting matchup to see if this is a legitimate opportunity for the Colts to make the playoffs with him. Because if the Colts do make the playoffs, then the question is asked, well, what to make of Joe Flacco? Can he stay on the roster? Can he be a bridge quarterback potentially? Have Anthony Richardson kind of fall to the wayside as a failed project this early in his career? There are so many questions that could stem from the ramifications of a Colts win or a Vikings win this season, in this game particularly, so to speak, that I kind of feel like it would be fun just to see a Colts win. But that being said, I have to pick the Vikings because, they're still the better team. This defense, like I said, there's no way I feel like the over isn't going to hit in terms of, say, quarterback sacks and hurries, because Joe Flacco's is basically a statue back there. But that being said, I'm still giving the Colts a chance in this one. Because if it's a spirit thing, or more like uplifting kind of thing to boost the Colts, rather than, a true change, then I don't really know how to feel about it. But if it's a legitimate recognition of an opportunity, then you have to run with it. So this feels like one of those moments where I'm caught between two mindsets. One that thinks the Colts can succeed and one that knows they probably won't. And so this game is really going to be a rough one for bettors. And I'm not saying that you should bet the Colts, but, there is something to be said about a culture change, a quarterback change that could help a team. And you're getting the Vikings at a very weird time in their season where, their guards might be down right now. But that being said, I will mention, to close the show, the reason as well why Minnesota should be a comfortable winner in this one. That is the return of TJ Hawkinson. Let me not forget about that. I feel like, the reason why the Vikings offense looks so stagnant in these past two games, because, Sam Darnold was getting pressured a little too much and he didn't necessarily have easy routes to throw to or easy looks. So TJ Hawkinson, against defenses that could project to bring more pressure, could be the safety blanket that they need. He could open up a lot more in the screen game. He could open up a lot more down the sideline. I feel like there's a little bit more versatility now to the Vikings that wasn't there before in those two losses that defenses were able to exploit. So I feel like, with him coming back, with the Colts defense being what it is, which is not great, then of course I feel like the Vikings are comfortable winners in this one. That's why, I feel like I can't talk too highly about the Colts, even though I want to. But it's just the way this game is set up and the way these two teams look coming into it. The tension of the Colts, the kind of letdown of the Vikings. And so that's why I can't necessarily completely lean Vikings, but I kind of feel like it's the safest bet because there's too much question surrounding what the Colts could be. They could be a great thing, much like the Browns were last year with Joe Flacco at the helm. Or they could completely fall apart due to the tension surrounding this decision. But this is a landmark decision in the Colts 2024 season. Because if it works, then it's a gem. But if it doesn't, then it could be a detriment to the future of this franchise. And that's what's most important. But this is a very winnable game for both teams. It's just about the Vikings being a little bit better, and the return of TJ Hawkinson as well, that diversified this offense a little bit after those two losses, that makes me feel like the Vikings are winning. That being said, I'm taking the Vikings. It's a little bit weird, but I feel like it's the safest way to go. Now, just about do it for today's show. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Christopher Shepard. Like, follow, and subscribe to the show on the network if you want more content such as this. Also, subscribe to our Instagram and TikTok channels if you so choose as well. Make yourselves available to the Super Chats, Super Thanks, and Super Triggers features here on the show if you want to interact more directly with our live streams across the network. Great way to support the network. It's truly appreciated by all concerned. But that being said, we'll be back for a final show of the week tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. As always, happy, safe Halloween to you all. I'm out for today.